Hi, everybody. So I, in this quick little video, just wanted to first of all thank you for taking the academic integrity quiz and for signing the pledge. It means a lot to me that you are committed to not committing any academic dishonesty in this class. That being said, I do want to talk a little bit about the quiz because I want to clarify some things, particularly in some of those scenarios that you answered, because AI is hard, as you may have noticed from taking this quiz, because on the one hand, I feel like you're probably hearing a lot from teachers like, don't use AI. AI is bad. AI is terrible. But then maybe you're hearing from other places, like workplaces possibly, and from some instructors, depending on your field, and maybe not depending on your field. Other instructors might be like, AI is great. Why aren't you using AI? And it can be really confusing. So I want to talk a little bit more in depth about some of the questions that were on the quiz and some of the responses and maybe clarify them and show you a couple things. So the first question I wanted to talk about was this one about Acelia. So this I thought was a really interesting question because the the scenario revolved around her using Grammarly to help her improve her English. But specifically, the problem arose when in this part of the sentence where it says that Acelia had Grammarly not only locate the errors, but fix them as well. And that's where it tips into the area that is not acceptable use. But I want to talk a little bit about Grammarly because for years, instructors, including myself, were like, oh, get Grammarly, download Grammarly, have Grammarly help you. You should be using Grammarly. And now a lot of people are like, oh, well, Grammarly is acceptable. It's the same as using something like spell check. But the problem is that Grammarly is increasingly paid. So you usually have to have that subscription to it. But it's also increasingly using AI intermittently. So one of the things that I kind of want to point out to you is something that I've run through Grammarly, and I refuse to pay for Grammarly, so I am at the limit of what I can actually click on this Grammarly document. But this is the document that I put into Grammarly. Some of you may have recognized it because if you check it out, it's the 102 sample. And I just want to point out that when you get these suggestions, now again, I can't click on all of them because some of them are pro suggestions and I run out of my limit. But one of the things that can trip you up in Grammarly is that we have these different color-coded suggestions. So typically things like correctness, like when you go through and you choose one of the red categories, it's not going to let me click on any of them. But when you click on, oh, there we go. When you click on the red categories, typically that is the same as using your Microsoft Word. And you could say accept because you've missed the hyphen. But mixed in, depending on if you do have the paid version, mixed in with that are some of these blue and green suggestions, which may say things like split the sentence or improve your text. That's where it starts to sometimes cross the line into AI writing. So you may think that just like fixing a typo the same way your automatic spell checker would is what Grammarly is doing, when actually when you're choosing that, yeah, go ahead and improve the text, it may be rewriting and changing your language. And it's really hard to separate them, particularly if you're on a paid Grammarly plan. So that's where the area of confusion comes from there. So like, can you use Grammarly to just go through and tell you you made a spelling mistake? Sure. But it can become a little bit muddier when it starts making suggestions about clarity, engagement, and delivery. And some of the things you may think like, oh, it's just going to fix my word choice. But what it actually is fixing is the entire sentence that you've written. And once you cross into that territory, that's the kind of thing that you may not even be aware that you're doing it, but you may click it and then it might get flagged on something like a Turnitin checker. So that's one thing to watch out for. The next question that I wanted to look at was the one about Brian. So Brian's example is that he couldn't make it to the tutoring center and he used ChatGPT to recommend a dozen possible argument topics. This is an acceptable use of something like ChatGPT because The topics are already existing. What AI is doing in this case is pulling a cohesive list for him to look through. What he actually writes, what he turns in, the question he comes up with, the research that he does, the opinion that he forms, the materials he gathers. If Brian is doing that all on his own, then it's perfectly acceptable to use ChatGPT as like a tutoring center stand-in. Hey, can you give me some ideas? That's something that somebody in the tutoring center might well do. So that is an acceptable use. And then I also want to talk about Eloise, which is another acceptable use. And here, the response, the feedback response that you got was explaining that if it's something that an instructor or a writing tutor who was a human could do for you, and you're asking it to kind of perform the same function, then that is one hallmark of a fair use of AI. So Eloise asked her instructor for help choosing a topic, but she wasn't really sure how to get started, and she was a little hesitant to use generative AI, and it's probably a good idea to be hesitant. But in this case, you can use things like ChatGPT to learn more about your topic and more about the scope of your topic. And I mention that because that is something that you may need to do in order to answer the questions that are coming for you in the upcoming discussion board. You may need to ask ChatGPT, hey, who is the audience who's talking about my topic? How long has this topic been existed? Like, how long have people been talking about this in my field? If there are things that you don't know, ChatGPT can help you to know what you don't know. So the things that ChatGPT tells you, you're obviously going to want to put into your own words, and you're going to want to conduct your own research when the time comes. But if you want kind of an idea of like, how does this impact different cultures? Who is talking about this? Who in the field is concerned about this? What are the different sides? If you're looking to gather information, ChatGPT can be used as if it were almost like a more targeted Google search in that way. So you can use it to gain information, or like it were as if it were a tutor, but you wouldn't want to use it to actually write your responses or control your research. And if it tells you things you don't understand, so if you go to ChatGPT and you say, can you write me some good synthesis questions for my research topic, and you don't understand what those are, don't paste those into your discussion boards because you're not going to be able to answer them. ChatGPT is there to help you in ways that to help you understand, sometimes in ways to help you edit or revise, but that's pretty much the extent of how you would want to use it ethically in this class. And just as another fast example, I'm going to show you in ChatGPT kind of the different ways that you can approach looking at it, and like kind of a right way and a wrong way. So here I just asked it to fix my paragraph. I said, can you fix this paragraph? I gave it no prompting. I just said, fix it. And I put in a paragraph, and then it rewrote it. If I cut and paste this into my presentation, my paper, this would be an example of a unfair use of ChatGPT that would get flagged as problematic. Now, what I did instead that is a better use is I asked it in the following paragraph, can you identify and list sentence fragments without providing correction or advice? And you could change that to comma splices or run-on sentences. And then I pasted in my paragraph, and it just told me that my sentence that begins with the word regardless, there's something wrong with it. It's not telling me how to fix it. It's not fixing it for me. I just know that I need to go back and make some changes to that sentence. So that is something that you can do, and something I would recommend if you struggle with something that you know of, an identifiable problem like a sentence fragment issue or a run-on sentence issue or capitalization errors. You can ask ChatGPT to identify those for you, and then you can go and quickly fix them. So that's kind of the difference between some things that you don't want to do and some things that you do. And if you have any further questions about AI, I know it's constantly evolving. One of the best pieces of advice I can give you is be transparent. Try and avoid it in the later stages of the writing process, and also approach me and ask questions before anything actually happens, before you use it. Say like, hey, can I use AI for this? And I'll help you figure it out. All right. Thanks for tuning in.